I, 35 male, and my wife, 34 female, met each other in college. It was love at first sight. We were in the same thesis group during our senior year. We went to a large school, and we didn't have the same major, so we didn't cross paths until then. We were both from two different states, but we loved the city our school was in, so we planned on staying there after graduation. We didn't want to live together right after college because we worried that it would put a lot of pressure on our relationship. We continued dating as normal for a year after graduating and decided that we wanted to live together. I never once doubted our relationship. I knew that she was the only woman for me, and I planned on marrying her. I proposed to her when we were 25, and a lot of our friends from school were surprised by it. A lot of people didn't think we were going to last. Nobody ever explained why, other than the fact that my wife and I were total opposites. I was always very introverted and quiet, and she was outgoing and had a tendency to be loud at times. She was the life of the party in any room, and people gravitated toward her. That was one of the things that I loved the most about her, so I never even thought twice about it. After we got married, we were together for 12 years. We had 3 children together, owned a home, and were planning on retiring in 10 years and moving to a small town in Vermont. Unfortunately, my wife decided to throw all of that away. My wife was a marketing executive, and she had a pretty lavish job. She traveled a lot and managed a lot of overseas clients for her firm. I always thought that we had a strong foundation for our marriage, so I never worried about her when she went abroad on business. I knew that she went sightseeing and had friends in different countries, but I never suspected that she would be cheating on me. When she left, I never suspected anything until I found a pregnancy test in her bathroom while she was away. After our 3rd child, we decided we didn't want any more kids. We went over all the options, and the least expensive and least invasive way to prevent pregnancy would be getting a vasectomy. So I did. After that, my wife stopped taking birth control, and we didn't have any issues. So when I was cleaning my bathroom and saw a pregnancy test in the trash, it raised some suspicions. In hindsight, she had been displaying signs of morning sickness. But if she needed to take that test, that meant that she was at risk of getting pregnant. And I knew it couldn't have been by me. When I found the test, my wife was abroad. She was on a 6-hour time difference from us, and I knew that she was probably asleep. At least when I talked to her around 4 p.m. my time. That's what she told me she was doing. Out of curiosity, I checked her location on my iPhone to see that she wasn't at her hotel. It looked like she was at a restaurant in the heart of Stockholm. If she wanted to go out to dinner with a friend, she would have told me that, and I wouldn't have had any issue with it. Instead, she lied to me about going to bed. I knew that if she was lying to me, she must have been up to something. I went into her office and logged into her computer. Thankfully for me, she kept her lodging credentials on the inside of her notebook. I searched through everything that I could define to any sign of an affair, and I found it. It seemed like she was sleeping with the client. She was on a work trip to sea. I looked through emails and saw exchanges of pictures and updates about each other's lives. The message chain that I found dated back 3 years, but it looked like there were even more before then. They were telling each other about their families and plans for the future. A lot of the messages seemed very friendly. Then some were extremely explicit. I did some digging and I found out who the guy was. I already knew that he was a client, but I didn't know that when my wife studied abroad. In college, she met him, and they had stayed in contact ever since. She knew him even before she knew me. It looked like both of them lived their lives with their families and jobs, and whenever they had the chance, they would get together for sex. I spent the entire night looking through the vast history that they shared, trying to piece everything together. I was destroyed by it. I loved my wife more than anything in the world, and she had kept a secret like that for me the entire time I knew her. I didn't know the person I was married to, and I wanted out. There was no way I was going to stay with somebody who would lie the way that my wife had. I contacted a divorce attorney first thing in the morning and sent them all of the documents I'd put together with screenshots from my wife's computer. On top of everything I found, I discovered some interesting business secrets between my wife and her affair partner that I thought her boss might want to be privy to. Mainly, her trips abroad were entirely unnecessary. She was budgeting and fake trips at work and paying with company cards. There were private conversations between her and the other man where they planned dates to get together and came up with viable excuses for work. It was just an added level to how deceitful my wife was. I didn't tell my wife about it when I found everything out. Instead, I waited for her to get home. However, when she texted me before her 13-hour plane ride home, I had a brilliant idea to blow up everything for her while she was blissfully unaware. I reached out to her boss and I sent him everything. He was shocked by the information and told me that he was going to speak to others to see if he could gather more information. Meanwhile, I packed a few bags for myself and the kids and went to stay at my mother's house. We weren't going to be there when my wife returned home. Later that day, I put my kids to bed and eagerly awaited the phone calls from my wife as she realized exactly what was happening to her. Around 1 in the morning, I got dozens of text messages and calls from her telling me that we needed to talk. She asked me where I was with the kids, and all I did was respond that I was divorcing her, and the kids were safe with me and their grandmother. She ended up coming over to the house and demanding to see the kids while they were asleep, causing a big scene. I showed her the kids so she knew that they were okay. Then I told her she had to leave. I advised her to get a divorce attorney and to be prepared for whatever her boss had in store for her. She told me that I had no right to go through her personal belongings the way that I did, and she planned on filing a lawsuit against me. I didn't know how something like that would hold up, but I figured I would talk to my divorce attorney about it anyway. From what I understand, something similar happened with her partner abroad. I sent information to his employer about the misuse of company time and funds. I didn't know them, but I followed his wife on social media to see if there were any updates. She did end up leaving him. I divorced my wife, and she tried to put up quite the fight in the courtroom. There weren't any grounds for her to sue me in any way. On top of the divorce, her former employer filed against her for embezzlement of company funds. It looks like she's going to be getting out of that with a hefty fine, but she likely won't have to face jail time. However, the embezzlement suit helped me in the custody hearing. Now I'm living my life happily without her. It hurt a lot at first, and it took a lot of adjusting, but I know now that she wasn't who I thought she was. The woman I married never would have treated me the way that she did. I'm glad that I found out who she really was and left her while I had the chance. Opus, it sounds like your wife was a pathological liar to be able to continue an affair with somebody abroad for as long as she was without ever showing an inkling of the truth. It's scary. She seemed to have mastered the craft of lying. It's good that you contacted her employer about what she was doing because it is illegal to use company funds to buy yourself plane tickets and hotel rooms. She's lucky that she got away with just a slap on the wrist and nothing more. For the affair to have gone on for as long as it did, I would venture to say that she embezzled quite a bit of company money over the years. I'm glad that you are away from her now and realizing that you are better off without her. Now let's move on to our next story. My wife and I had been married for 8 years and we had 2 children together. I loved her dearly and I would have done anything to make her happy, but she ruined our family. We met through a dating app and started seeing each other shortly after matching. We just had so much in common and we clicked right away, so it only made sense for us to see where the relationship could go. Things got serious when she got pregnant with our first child. I think the news kind of fast-forwarded our relationship. It wasn't something that either of us seemed to be upset about, though. We were excited and we were in love. My wife gave birth to our beautiful daughter and we were as happy as could be. We got married after she gave birth to our daughter and settled down in a nice house shortly after that. The order we did things was kind of backward, but it all worked out in the end for us. Or at least that's what I thought. The first couple of years of our marriage were rocky. We had only been dating for about 6 months when she got pregnant, so we didn't know each other that well. We weren't even living together at the time. There were a lot of things about our personalities that clashed when we were living in such proximity to each other. I was always a little out there with my personality, extroverted and outgoing. I wanted to do things when I had the chance and experience life. My wife, on the other hand, was very reserved and liked to relax. Sometimes I thought that I was too high energy for her. We got into arguments now and then, but we always settled them amicably and moved on. I thought that communication was a strong suit of ours. If there was an argument where we couldn't settle it right away, and either of us was mad, my wife would go to her sister's house and spend the night there. I knew that she would vent and get everything off her chest, and then in the morning she would come back and we would talk. All of those feelings were only exacerbated when she gave birth to her second child. Don't get me wrong, I love my son more than anything, but he was driving both of us crazy as a newborn. He would stay up all night long and cry, and it took hours to get him to fall asleep. Everyone in the house was sleep-deprived and irritable all the time for the first month after bringing him home. Eventually, we figured out a way to soothe him and get everything back to normal. I hate saying this because it sounds like a stereotypical toxic thing to say, but my wife stayed home to take care of the kids, and I worked 70 hours a week. A lot of the times when he was up crying, I was trying to get as much sleep as possible for work. I kind of expected my wife to be the one to take care of him. Months had passed since that was an issue, and I hadn't even realized that it was something that my wife was holding on to. It was a grudge that she had with me that I didn't even know about, that she couldn't let go of. One night we had gotten into a fight over something trivial, and she brought all of it up. She threw it in my face as if I were a negligent father and a bad partner because I wouldn't take care of our son while he was crying at night. I argued my side, telling her that I had to work and the exhaustion was affecting it. I helped often with our daughter, so I didn't understand why she couldn't see where I was coming from. She was very upset about everything, and eventually she stormed out, leaving me to take care of both the kids for the night. I did just that and waited for her to come back in the morning to talk about it, like we always did. She got back much later than she normally did the following day, which only made my frustration worse because I had to call in sick for work that day. Because of it, it seemed like she genuinely didn't care about my time and what effect her actions had on me. It was around noon when she got home, and we talked about everything. She was extra apologetic to me. It seems like she didn't want to talk about anything. Rather, she just wanted to concede to whatever it was that I had to say and put an end to it all. When it was over, she left to go say hi to the kids, and we didn't bring it up again. Over the next couple of months, she was acting a lot different. There was a spring in her step that I couldn't quite figure out. What happened to get it? She would visit her sister, usually once or twice a week before, but during that time, she was going every other day. It seemed odd at the time. Looking back, I know exactly why she was going over there. Sometimes she would bring the kids, sometimes she would ask me to watch them, and go by herself. I found out the truth of what was happening when I saw her sneak out of bed one night to take a call. I guess she forgot to put her phone on silent before going to bed that night, because her ringer woke me up. She answered it before I could say anything, to ask what was happening, and she whispered for the person on the other end to hang on before she snuck away from me right away. I clocked what was happening as strange. It was weird for her to be getting a call in the middle of the night. First of all, then on top of that, for her to answer it and sneak off was also weird. I stayed still and pretended not to notice, and I waited for her to leave. After a minute, I tipped out of the room to see what was happening. I heard noises coming from the laundry room and pressed my ear to the door to try and hear what it was. I could hear somebody on speakerphone telling my wife to do things to herself, and my wife clearly enjoying them. She had snuck off to have phone sex with someone. I listened for a couple of minutes while it continued. The person on the other end was whispering and trying to be quiet, which told me that they were both doing something they shouldn't have been. I contemplated bursting through the door to confront them, but I decided I wanted to play it a different way. So I went back to the bedroom and pretended to go to sleep. She didn't come back for about half an hour. I stayed up waiting until I could hear her snoring next to me, and I got out of bed, taking her phone with me, into the kitchen. I looked at her most recent call and saw that it was a familiar name. It was her sister's boyfriend. Her sister, her best friend in the world, had been dating her boyfriend for 5 years, and she was head over heels in love with him. Her sister dated a lot of losers, and she thought that her boyfriend was the one for her. She wanted to marry him and start a family with him. As shocked as I was that my wife was cheating on me, the fact that she was cheating on me with her sister's boyfriend made it so much worse. I just couldn't believe it. I looked through the text messages and saw both of them planning times to get together when her sister wouldn't be home and sending each other pictures and videos. I was already extremely upset about the cheating and the lying, but then I saw times when my wife told him that she had to bring the kids along with her. I was furious and I wanted to ruin everything for her. I took as many screenshots and saved as many videos, as I couldn't send all of them to myself. I went back to the bedroom and put her phone back, then went to the living room to sleep for the night. I couldn't stand to be around her. I called out of work the following day and went to a coffee shop where I searched online for a divorce attorney. I found one and set up a meeting with them as soon as possible to end my marriage. On top of that, I wanted to tell her sister about everything before my wife had a chance to go in and make it seem like I was lying. I drove to the restaurant where her sister worked and waited for her shift to end. When I saw her in the parking lot, I got her attention and asked her if we could talk. She seemed confused and also a little nervous, but she joined me in my car. I told her everything I knew. I showed her what I thought she could stomach from the videos and screenshots that I had. She was heartbroken by it all. Her sister was supposed to be the person she could trust most in the world, but instead she broke that trust. She was hysterical. After she recovered, I asked her what she wanted to do, and she immediately told me that she was kicking her boyfriend out of the house. She got angry very quickly as she started talking about it. I hadn't realized, but he didn't have a job, and he wasn't paying rent with her. He was basically a broke, talentless SoundCloud rapper. I ended up driving her to her house and staying there with her while she broke up with her boyfriend, kicking him out of the house and throwing his things out of the window. Her boyfriend seemed like he wanted to beat me up, but he didn't try. If he did, I would have probably sent him to the hospital. When all of that was done, she and I drove back to my house where we both confronted my wife. My wife tried to defend herself and say that the videos that I had were deep fakes and that I was just trying to sabotage her. Why that was something I wanted to do, I didn't know. She didn't have a leg to stand on in her arguments. I told her that I wanted her to get out of the house and I was going to be divorcing her. She started crying about how she didn't have anywhere else to go and she was begging for forgiveness. She told my sister that it just happened one day. When she was mad at me, she tried to blame it all on the boyfriend by saying he saw how vulnerable she was and he swooped in to try and seduce her. He was sleazy enough to try something like that, but that didn't mean that my wife had to agree to it. If he kissed her, she could have pushed him away and then told me and her sister. She didn't do that. Instead, she slept with him and then carried on an affair that lasted several months. Now I have divorced my wife and I have full custody of the kids. The deciding factor in that was how she brought them along to have an affair. The judge didn't like the sound of that. Her sister has cut her off completely. They don't have any contact with each other, and from what her sister has told me, a lot of their family has ended communication with my wife as well. I still see her sister regularly because she is the aunt to my children. She loves them, and I didn't think it would be fair to cut her out of their lives. Ultimately, I'm glad that I found out about my wife's true nature. Looking back at our relationship, it didn't seem like we were meant to be together, and we're finally both out of the relationship. I wish it could have ended differently, but I think everything happens for a reason. And unfortunately, the journey here was a little rockier than I would have liked. Opus, I can't imagine finding out that your wife is cheating on you the way that you did. It must have been incredibly difficult to go back to bed after you heard what you did and pretend like nothing happened. I think your wife's behavior was truly abhorrent. Cheating is already awful, but cheating with your sister's partner is terrible, especially when she knew her sister's history with men and how much she loved the guy that she was with. It might be easy to assume that this wasn't the first time he cheated in the relationship, but it would have been the most hurtful way for him to cheat. I think that the excuse that your wife gave was pathetic. She couldn't take responsibility for her actions. And I think that just further shows how immature she was. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. If you liked it, please support us with a like, as well as subscribe to our channel. Write in the comments what you think about the story. Thank you for being here with us.